I wasn't supposed to be home until Friday night. That was the plan everyone knew, the airline, my assistant, even my wife. But when the client meeting ended early and the last flight out had an open seat, I didn't think twice. I wanted my own bed, my own shower, the quiet comfort of the house I'd worked 15 years to afford. The $880,000 price tag wasn't just a number to me, it was proof that all those sleepless nights and missed birthdays had meant something. It was close to midnight when my car turned into our street. Everything looked normal at first. Porch lights glowed softly. Neighbors' houses slept in darkness. Then I saw it. My garage door was half open. At first, I told myself my wife must have forgotten to close it. That thought lasted exactly 2 seconds, until I noticed the harsh white glow spilling onto the driveway, construction lights. The kind you don't own unless you're doing serious work. As I pulled closer, the sound hit me. Metal grinding against concrete, a drill whining then stopping abruptly. I stepped out of the car, my suitcase still in my hand, and walked toward the garage. Inside, 3 men stood frozen. One had a jackhammer resting against his leg. Another held a clipboard mid-air, like he'd been interrupted halfway through a sentence. The third, who looked like the foreman, met my eyes and went pale. No one spoke. For a moment, all I could hear was the ringing silence left behind by the machines they'd shut off too quickly. "Can I help you?" I finally asked, my voice calm but tight. The foreman swallowed. "Sir, we were told you wouldn't be back yet." That sentence landed heavier than any confession could have. "I live here," I said slowly. "Why is my garage being renovated?" They exchanged looks, quick, nervous, rehearsed. The foreman flipped his clipboard around and held it out to me. My name was printed neatly at the top of the page. My address beneath it. Even my phone number was correct. Approval signed. Dated 3 days ago. I hadn't been within 1,000 miles of this house 3 days ago. "What exactly are you doing?" I asked. "Structural upgrade," he said too fast. "Soundproofing, reinforcement. Client requested discretion." Client, not homeowner. My eyes scanned the garage. Half of it was unrecognizable. A new wall frame stood where my tool rack used to be. Thick insulation lined the studs, dense, expensive, nothing like standard garage material. Electrical wiring had been rerouted. A ventilation pipe ran upward, freshly installed, its edges still sharp and clean. This wasn't cosmetic, this was intentional. "Who hired you?" I asked. The foreman hesitated just long enough to matter. "Your wife." That word twisted something in my chest. I thanked them, told them to shut down for the night, and walked into the house without waiting for questions. The silence inside felt different, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. My wife came down the stairs in a robe, eyes wide, surprise already rehearsed on her face. "You're home early," she said. "Yeah," I replied, watching her carefully. "We need to talk about the garage." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said softly. "I was hoping you wouldn't see that yet." And in that moment, standing in the house I thought I knew, I realized the renovation wasn't the real shock. It was the fact that everyone involved seemed to know my schedule better than I did. She said it was supposed to be a surprise. That word again, surprise. As if the sight of strangers tearing apart my garage in the middle of the night was something any sane person would plan as a gift. I watched her face while she spoke, looking for the small tells I'd learned to notice in boardrooms and negotiations. The slight tightening around the mouth, the pause before a practiced answer. "You could have told me," I said. "I wanted it to be perfect first," she replied quickly. "You're always talking about increasing the value of the house." That was true, I'd said it before, many times, but I'd never said anything about soundproof walls or industrial ventilation. I nodded, pretending to accept the explanation, and went upstairs to shower. The hot water should have relaxed me, but my mind kept replaying the foreman's words. "You wouldn't be back yet." After she fell asleep, I went back down quietly and opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I logged into our joint account first. Large withdrawals, cash spread out over weeks just under the amount that would trigger alerts. Then I checked the email tied to household expenses. Nothing, no quotes, no contracts, no renovation plans. I searched the contractor's name the foreman had mentioned. Nothing came up. No website, no business registration, no reviews, just a dead end. Around 2 a.m., I slipped on my shoes and stepped back into the garage. The smell of dust and fresh lumber hung thick in the air. Under the harsh lights, everything looked even more wrong. The new wall wasn't just dividing space, it was closing something off. I knocked on it gently. The sound was dull, swallowed instantly by the insulation. I traced the electrical lines with my eyes. Extra outlets, heavy-duty wiring. The kind you'd need to power something that ran for hours at a time. This wasn't for storage. Behind one of the tool cabinets, I noticed something new, a small metal box mounted low to the wall, locked, no label. I tried to open it. It didn't budge. I went back inside and checked the hallway security panel. One camera feed was missing, the garage. It showed offline with a timestamp from 3 days ago, the exact date on the approval form. My phone buzzed softly in my hand. A message notification then gone. When I checked, there was nothing there. No alert. No preview, just the faint sense that I hadn't imagined it. The next morning, I told my wife I'd be working from home. She seemed relieved, too relieved. The contractors arrived at 8 sharp. This time, they barely looked at me. They went straight to work, faster than before, as if time suddenly mattered. I stepped outside and spoke to my neighbor across the street, an older man who'd lived there longer than anyone. "Did you notice anything strange while I was gone?" I asked casually. Hesitated, then leaned closer. "A lot of late nights," he said. "Vans coming and going, and once I thought I heard shouting, but it stopped real quick." "Did you see who was here?" He shook his head. "Didn't think it was my place to ask." When I went back inside, my wife was on the phone, speaking in a low voice. She turned when she saw me and ended the call immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just curious. When exactly did you start planning the renovation?" She paused. "Just for a second. After you left," she said. "Why?" "Because I knew that wasn't true. Because someone had started planning it long before I ever packed my suitcase. And because whatever they were building in my garage, they were racing against something, or someone. I decided to stop asking questions out loud. That was the first real choice I made once I understood something bigger was happening. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't going to reveal itself because I demanded it politely. People were already lying too smoothly, acting too calm, moving too fast. Instead, I watched. For the next 2 days, I stayed home. I worked from my office upstairs, door cracked just enough to hear the rhythm of the house. My wife moved differently now, lighter steps, fewer random conversations, her phone never more than an arm's length away. She laughed at the right moments, touched my shoulder when she passed, played the part perfectly. Too perfectly. The contractors changed their routine on the third day. They started early, earlier than before. At 6:30 a.m. I heard the low hum of a generator kick on, followed by a sound I didn't recognize at first. A steady, deep vibration like something heavy being tested for the first time. I went to the top of the stairs and listened. The noise didn't travel through the house the way normal construction did. It stayed contained, trapped, soundproofed. I waited until lunchtime, when the workers stepped outside to eat, then slipped into the garage again. The new wall was almost finished now, drywall up, seams taped, but something was different. A narrow door had been installed flush with the wall, painted the same dull gray. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it completely. It was locked. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing, no sound at all. Behind me, the door to the house creaked softly. "You're not supposed to go in there yet," my wife said. I turned slowly. "Yet," she froze, then forced a smile. "I mean it's not safe, dust, tools." I nodded, stepped back, and let the moment pass. But the word echoed in my head. Yet, that night after everyone was asleep, I did something I hadn't planned on doing when I woke up that morning. I went into my wife's office and opened the filing cabinet she always kept locked. The key was hidden exactly where I'd once teased her about hiding it. Old habits die hard. Inside were folders I didn't recognize. Bank statements from an account I'd never seen. A burner phone, powered off. And at the bottom, a thin envelope with my name written on it in someone else's handwriting. Inside was a printed itinerary of my business trip, not the one I remembered booking. This one had notes in the margins, arrival times, hotel room number, even the night my flight was supposed to land back home 2 days from now. Friday, the day I was never meant to be here. My chest tightened as the realization settled in. They hadn't been surprised I came home early. They'd been counting on me not coming home at all. I powered on the burner phone. No passcode. A single thread of messages opened automatically. I didn't need to scroll far. "It's almost ready. He won't be back until Friday. Once it's sealed, no one will ever know." I locked the phone and sat there in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of my house. Every sound felt different now. The walls, the floors. Even the air felt staged, like a set built to look like a home. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Then I made another call, one I never thought I'd need to make from my own living room. I told them I suspected fraud, identity misuse, unauthorized construction. They asked me one question before agreeing to look into it. "Are you in immediate danger?" I looked toward the garage door. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I think I will be if I pretend I don't see what's happening." And for the first time since I'd walked into that half-open garage, I felt certain of one thing. Whatever was being built back there wasn't meant to protect me. It was meant to disappear something, or someone. They told me not to confront anyone yet. The investigator on the phone spoke calmly, professionally, like this was just another case file sliding across his desk. He said these situations got messy when emotions took over. He said evidence mattered more than accusations. He said if I felt unsafe, I should leave the house immediately. I didn't leave. Instead, I installed an app that mirrored the home network traffic onto my laptop. It wasn't something I was proud of, but pride felt irrelevant now. Within an hour, I saw activity I couldn't explain, new devices connecting and disconnecting, most of them active only when the garage lights were on. One device transmitted large amounts of data late at night. Another pinged a location outside the city every few minutes like it was checking in. That evening, the contractors didn't leave at their usual time. At 10 p.m., the generator was still running. At 11, a dark SUV pulled into the driveway and parked close to the garage, engine idling. I watched from the upstairs window as a man stepped out. He didn't wear work clothes. No dust. No hesitation. He walked straight to the garage like he'd done it 100 times before. My wife wasn't in bed. I found her downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table, hands folded, eyes fixed on nothing. When she looked up at me, there was no smile this time, no acting. "You weren't supposed to come back early," she said quietly. I didn't raise my voice. "Who is he?" She closed her eyes. "Someone who fixes problems." That answer told me everything and nothing all at once. I went back upstairs and waited. Every minute stretched thin, each sound from the garage making my pulse jump. Around midnight, the vibrations started again, the deep, contained hum I'd heard before. I imagined walls being sealed, doors being locked forever. At 12:17 a.m., the power flickered, just once, long enough for me to notice the house resetting around me. My phone buzzed immediately, a text from an unknown number. "Stay upstairs." I didn't respond. Instead, I grabbed the spare car keys from my drawer and slipped out through the bedroom window onto the roof of the porch. The night air was cold, sharp, grounding. I dropped down quietly and moved along the side of the house until I reached the garage. The new side door was there now, fully installed, unmarked. I pressed my ear against it, still nothing. I reached for the handle, locked. Behind me, footsteps crunched on gravel. "You really shouldn't be here," the man from the SUV said. I turned slowly. He was closer than I expected. Calm, confident. The kind of person who never raised his voice because he never had to. "This is my house," I said. He smiled faintly. "On paper, maybe." Before I could respond, sirens cut through the night. Not close yet, but coming. His smile vanished. He stepped back, eyes flicking toward the street. "Someone warned you," he said. "That's unfortunate." He walked away quickly, disappearing into the garage just as flashing lights reflected off the windows of neighboring houses. The SUV roared to life and sped off through the back alley. By the time the authorities arrived, the contractors were gone. Tools abandoned, lights still on. The garage stood silent, sealed, and wrong in a way I couldn't put into words. They told me not to enter it yet. They told me to wait. I stood in my driveway, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, watching strangers tape off my property. My wife stood a few feet away, crying quietly, not looking at me. I realized then that whatever was behind that wall had already changed everything, even if it was empty, even if it was gone. Waiting turned out to be the hardest part. They kept me out of the garage until morning, citing safety protocols, possible hazards, and a dozen other reasons that all sounded reasonable on the surface. But I knew the real reason. Whatever they were about to find or not find would decide whether this stayed a domestic mess or became something much darker. I didn't sleep. At sunrise, they finally cut through the new drywall. The sound echoed through the garage, sharp and final. Dust filled the air as the first panel fell away, revealing the space behind it. At first glance, it looked ordinary, too ordinary. A small, empty room, clean concrete floor, fresh paint, no furniture, no stains, no obvious reason for all the secrecy. One of the officers exhaled slowly. Disappointment maybe, or relief. Then another officer pointed upward. The ceiling was lower than it should have been. They brought in a ladder and pushed against one of the panels. It shifted. A hidden hatch. Above it was another space, unfinished, cramped, and clearly rushed. Loose wiring hung like veins. In the corner sat a heavy steel cabinet bolted to the floor. Inside were hard drives, multiple phones, cash sealed in plastic, and a small stack of documents tied together with a rubber band. My name was on every one of them: loan applications, liability forms, contracts that transferred responsibility without ownership. A clean way to pin something on someone who was never supposed to be present when it went wrong. The investigator looked at me carefully. Did you recognize any of this? I recognize the signature, I said. It's not mine. They photographed everything, bagged it, labeled it. The room filled with quiet urgency. Radios crackled. People moved with purpose now. Whatever doubt had existed was gone. My wife was taken aside for questioning. I watched from the driveway as she spoke, her shoulders shaking, her words spilling out too fast. Every so often she glanced toward me like she was hoping I'd intervene. I didn't. By afternoon, the house felt hollow. Not just because of the missing wall, but because the version of my life I'd believed in had collapsed just as completely. The investigator returned and told me they were still tracking the man from the SUV, that he wasn't surprised I'd never met him before. He doesn't like to be remembered, he said. They advised me to stay somewhere else for a few days, just in case. I packed a bag mechanically, each item feeling borrowed, like I was already a guest in my own life. As I walked past the garage one last time, I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint outline on the floor barely visible beneath the dust. The shape of something heavy that had been there for a long time. Whatever it was, it hadn't been meant to stay. At the hotel that night, my phone rang. An unknown number, I answered. You don't understand what you interrupted, the voice said calmly. Enlighten me, I replied, a pause, then a soft laugh. You will. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at the wall, realizing the renovation wasn't about hiding the past. It was about preparing for something that was supposed to happen next. And somewhere along the way, my early return had ruined a very careful plan. The hotel room smelled like disinfectant and unfamiliar soap. I slept in short bursts, each one broken by the same image, the outline on the garage floor, darker than the rest of the concrete, as if something had pressed its weight there for years. When morning came, I woke with the kind of clarity that only arrives after the damage is done. My phone was already buzzing. The investigator told me they'd traced the network traffic from my house to a shell company operating out of a rented office 2 cities away. Empty desks. No signage. Paid in cash. The hard drives were being imaged, the phones cracked. He didn't promise answers. He promised movement. Movement was enough. I drove back to the house with an escort to collect more clothes. The yellow tape was gone, but the air still felt watched. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it, and yet none of it belonged to me anymore. I moved room to room, photographing drawers, closets, the quiet corners you don't notice until you're afraid of them. In my wife's office, the filing cabinet stood open, emptied. She'd taken nothing personal, only paperwork. On the kitchen counter lay a single envelope. Inside was a note, written neatly, carefully, like someone trying to be understood. I didn't start this, I just kept it going. They told me it would end clean. No names, no apology. Outside, I checked the garage one last time. The hidden room was exposed now, ugly and unfinished in the daylight. I knelt and brushed dust from the faint outline on the floor. It matched the dimensions of a large safe or a container meant to be moved quickly. There were scrape marks near the wall, angled toward the side door. Someone had dragged something out in a hurry. My phone chimed. A location ping from the investigator. One of the burner phones had woken up miles away, then gone dark again. Like a heartbeat, still alive. That afternoon, a lawyer called, then another. The paperwork found in the ceiling had already done its damage. Accounts were frozen temporarily. My name, clean for decades, now came with qualifiers. I learned how fast a life could be put on pause by forms you didn't sign. At dusk, the investigator called again. They'd identified the man from the SUV. Not a name, an alias. He specialized in logistics, moving things that didn't want to be seen, setting up spaces that could be dismantled overnight. Paid to prepare my garage for a transfer that never happened. What was supposed to be transferred? I asked. We don't know, he said, but we know when. Friday night, the night I wasn't supposed to be home. I sat in my car, engine off, watching my house darken window by window. For the first time, the size of it felt wrong. Too big for one person, too quiet for a family. The value I'd once been proud of now felt like bait. Another text arrived from the unknown number. You forced it. Delays create risk. I typed back before I could stop myself. Then stop. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Risk has a way of finding new addresses. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned the key and drove away, not to the hotel this time, but to a place where my name didn't open doors automatically. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere temporary. Because I finally understood the real danger wasn't what had been hidden in my garage. It was how easily my life had been prepared for removal. The place I chose was a short-term rental on the edge of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a parking lot that stayed half lit all night. It wasn't comfortable, but it was anonymous, and anonymity felt like protection now. I paid in advance, cash, old habits resurfacing fast. By the second day, the messages stopped. No unknown numbers, no warnings. That silence bothered me more than the threats. Silence meant recalculation. It meant someone else was deciding what to do with the mess I'd created by coming home early. The investigator called that afternoon. They'd pulled partial data from one of the hard drives. Not content, metadata, dates, file structures, transfer logs, enough to confirm what the garage had been prepared for. A temporary holding space. Not for people, for assets. Digital and physical. Things that needed to be off the books for a short window before being moved somewhere cleaner. The soundproofing wasn't for screams, it was for machinery, servers, equipment, things that hummed and vibrated and couldn't be overheard. And the outline on the floor, I asked. A vault, he said. Mobile, heavy, expensive. The Friday transfer would have put everything inside my property for exactly 12 hours, long enough to shift liability, long enough to make me the answer to questions I didn't know were coming. My wife had known pieces of it, enough to help, not enough to control. She'd been told it was temporary, that it would be invisible, that my absence made it safe. She'd been wrong. That evening I went back to the house one last time alone, no tape, no officers, just a structure full of echoes. I walked through slowly, letting myself remember what it had been before secrets moved in. In the garage, I stood where the wall had been and imagined it sealed again, clean, quiet, convincing. Anyone could have lived with that lie. I gathered a box of personal items. Photos. A watch my father gave me, paperwork I could prove was mine. When I closed the front door behind me, I didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses. The sale happened faster than I expected. Quiet, off-market, a price lower than it's worth but high enough to be clean. I signed everything with a hand that no longer shook. The house passed to someone else, and with it, whatever shadow still lingered. Weeks later, the investigator called one final time. They won't bother you again, he said. The delay cost them too much, they moved on. I asked if they'd ever find the man from the SUV. People like that, he replied, don't get found, they get replaced. After the call, I sat alone and let the weight of it all settle. The betrayal, the precision, the near miss. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything, not to a mistake I made but to a plan built around my absence. I didn't rebuild, not right away. I downsized, changed routines. Learned to value unpredictability over comfort. My life became smaller, quieter, but it was mine again. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that garage. About how a few extra hours on a flight changed the direction of my entire life. How a door left half open exposed a truth that was never meant to see daylight. People talk about coming home early like it's a small thing. For me, it was the difference between owning a house and becoming the place where someone else hid their sins. Months passed before I could tell the story without my voice tightening. By then, my life looked nothing like it had when I'd first pulled into that driveway. Different city, different routines. Even my name felt lighter without the weight of shared accounts and quiet lies attached to it. I'd learned how fast stability could turn into exposure, how a house, no matter how expensive, was still just a container for the choices made inside it. Every so often, I'd search the address online. The new owners had renovated again. Fresh paint, a redesigned garage, no trace of the wall, the door, the outline on the floor. The listing photos were bright and inviting. Safe, anyone looking at them would have seen a dream. That was the most unsettling part. I'd almost been one of those people, living comfortably on top of something I didn't understand, trusting that silence meant safety. The truth was quieter than fear and far more dangerous. One evening, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You weren't the target, you were the cover. I stared at the words for a long time, then folded the paper carefully and threw it away. I didn't need more explanations. I already knew how it worked. People didn't always destroy things directly. Sometimes they borrowed your life, rearranged a few walls, and handed it back just long enough for you to take the fall. The investigation eventually closed. No arrests announced. No headlines. That too was a kind of answer. I was advised to move on, so I did. I invested in smaller places, temporary ones, places easy to leave. I stopped announcing my travel plans. I learned the value of coming back early and not telling anyone until the door was already open. Sometimes, when friends talk about home upgrades or surprise renovations, I smile and say nothing. They wouldn't understand how a drill in the night can sound like a warning. How a clipboard with your name on it can mean your life is being edited without your consent. The house was worth $880,000. My early return was worth much more than that. It cost me a marriage. It cost me certainty. But it saved me from becoming a footnote in someone else's operation. Another name buried under paperwork, another structure designed to absorb blame. Now, when I come home, I pause before unlocking the door. I listen. I look. I make sure the space I'm about to enter still belongs to me. Because I learned the hard way that the most dangerous renovations aren't the ones you see. They're the ones done while you're away.